What's up, everyone? I'm here with my NFL Week 1 DraftKings sleeper/value picks. If you have not seen my main picks video, there'll be a link down in the description below. That's where I cover the entire slate. That video will be uploaded every Wednesday. This style of video right here will be uploaded every Friday. And if you're new to my channel, basically what I do here is I cover a handful of guys I think are being slept on, and then I cover a few players I think have high value given their price. So anyway, without further ado, let's go and get right to the picks. All right, so my first pick here is Antonio Brown. Now, before you say what, Antonio Brown is never slept on nor a great value, hear me out. Because this week, I actually think he happens to be both. All right, so 8,800 for Antonio Brown, that's actually not a bad price for Brown, okay? That'd probably be one of the cheaper prices we see for him all season, especially given the matchup, all right? He has a killer matchup, but before I get to that, one of the reasons I think Brown is being slept on is because of some of the great plays that we have at running back this week. Now, the big three being Le'Veon Bell, LaShawn McCoy, and David Johnson, all three of them are $8,000 plus. Now, especially if you want to play two of the three, there's no way you're going to be able to play Antonio Brown if you play two of the three. And even if you just play one of them, it's probably going to be a little bit tricky. You're going to have to tiptoe around the rest of your lineup to get Antonio Brown in there. So because of that, I think he's being slept on, or at least overlooked. Maybe not slept on is a proper term, but just at least overlooked, and no one's going to play him as much as they should given the matchup. Antonio Brown is going to be shadowed by Jamar Taylor. Wow. So that alone should just be like, wow, I need to play Antonio Brown. If he was 10K, I would still be considering Antonio Brown this week because of how good that matchup is. Jamar Taylor is not an awful corner, but he didn't shadow anybody in 2016 that I know of as far as #1 receivers go. And the best receiver that I can find that Jamar Taylor actually matched up against a couple times last season was A.J. Green. He covered Green for 3 of his targets in their matchup. A.J. Green had 3 receptions for 72 yards and a touchdown on just those 3 targets. So, yes, give me as much Antonio Brown in GPPs as I can get. I think you can play Antonio Brown in cash games if you want to. I'm not really going to go that route. I think going with the running back, the more expensive running backs, is the safer play, which we always should be looking for in cash games is the safe play. But in GPPs, I think Antonio Brown is not only a safe play, but actually, a pretty solid play in terms of ownership and being a little bit different. Because if you put Antonio Brown in your lineup, that instantly is going to make you have to build your lineup differently. And that's exactly what we want in GPPs, to get players that differentiate ourselves, but also don't sacrifice matchups, okay? So Antonio Brown is a really, really good play this week. And I'm going to get as much of him as I can in GPPs. All right, so my second guy here is another wide receiver, and I think Larry Fitzgerald has a ton of value this week. At 5,900, I think he's borderline must-play in cash games for me this week. Fitzgerald is not a sexy pick anymore, really, for the majority of people. He's not a guy who jumps out to them every single week that they have to play like an Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham Jr. The list goes on. He's not a wide receiver people think they have to force in any given week, but he's still a great play. He's not a guy who's going to post a 7 reception, 125 yard, and 3 touchdown stat line anymore. He's not that guy, but he is a guy who will post a 7 reception, 85 yard, and maybe a pair of touchdown stat line. And he's super consistent with his receptions. He's top 10 in targets. He was top 3 in reception rate last season. So he's still getting a ton of targets. He was top 10. I believe he was even top 5. Yeah, he was top 10, in red zone targets. So he's a guy who was just used so heavily. And we take all that into consideration, add in the fact of his price, and then we add in who he's facing. He's going to be facing Quandre Diggs, who, let's say, has been lackluster at shadowing people. And not to mention, Jared Davis, who is a rookie, is going to be starting at middle linebacker for the Lions. So that could, bode well for Fitzgerald as well. So I think Fitzgerald is a great play this week. I know some people are scared to play Fitzgerald and David Johnson in the same cash game lineup. I don't think you should be. I think that's perfectly fine. I know some people are even flirting with the idea of playing Carson Palmer, Fitz, and David Johnson. I think you can do that too. Carson Palmer's another guy who's not a bad price at 6K, I believe it is. So, I like some Cardinals this particular week, and I think Fitzgerald is borderline must play. All right, so rounding out the first set of players here, I have Danny Woodhead, and he is a deep dark horse sleeper in my opinion. I haven't heard anybody talk about him hardly at all. And I think he's a really, really interesting play because personally, I love playing receiving running backs, especially in my flex position. I think there's a lot of value there, whether they're overpriced, underpriced. I think you can always find a pretty good priced receiving running back any given week. And Woodhead is not priced too poorly this week. He's 5,200. I think this is a really good prime example to leverage off of another receiving running back in Christian McCaffrey. Now, in cash games, I'm heavily considering McCaffrey, but in GPPs, I think McCaffrey likely will be pretty heavily owned. So I think if you want to leverage off of McCaffrey, going with Woodhead at 5,200 is not a bad option. Now, there's a couple things you need to be aware of with Woodhead. First off, he is coming off of an ACL injury. That obviously is very worrisome, but, you know, he's been practicing in full pretty much all week, I think it is. And I'm not really sure who else, you know, they're going to throw to out there in Baltimore. You know, they do have Jeremy Maclin now, who will be an option. Mike Wallace is always somewhat of an option. They did lose Dennis Pitta, so I think that helps some of their target shares a little bit as well. I'm really just concerned that if Woodhead is not even on the field enough these first few weeks, that obviously is going to hurt him. But he's a guy I'm going to take a chance on in a couple of different GPP lineups because he has value there. I don't think he's going to get too many, especially he's not going to run the ball very often in the red zone. But, you know, I'm not so sure the Ravens are even going to run the ball that much to begin with. So I feel like he could get used pretty heavily, and I'm very interested to see what happens. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to play him a ton because I really want to see how the Ravens utilize him first, but I am going to take a shot at him in a few different lineups. All right, so next up I have Todd Gurley, and he's been pretty heavily talked about this week among players in the DFS industry. And personally, you know, you either think he's a good play or you think he's a bad play. I think he's a good play. Regardless of what you think they're going to do all season long, they're in a great spot here. You know, I can't remember who tweeted this stat, so forgive me for that, but the stat roughly said that in the last 6 Rams home games where they were favored, Todd Gurley averaged like 19-something DraftKings points per game, and I think like the lowest amount of points he put up in that given situation was like 13-something. So I think this roughly 16-point projection that he has right now is fair. I think between like 14 and 16 points is a pretty accurate assessment for him. 6K is not a bad price for him. I'm really, really hoping Todd Gurley gets some more exposure to the passing game this season. You know, Jared Goff is not a guy who throws the ball downfield very often. He's very Sam Bradford-like, at least as of late for Sam Bradford. So I hope Gurley gets involved in the passing game. You know, B.J. Cunningham is no longer a Ram, so that could help Gurley. I don't know too much about the Rams' backup running back situation, so I don't know if they have a preferred third down kind of receiving running back right now. But Gurley has shown, at least in my opinion, I think he's a pretty reasonable guy out of the backfield to catch some passes. So I hope Gurley gets involved more in the passing game, and if that does, we could see his value go up a lot more week to week. But whether you think the Rams are going to be good or bad this season, you know, this is a great matchup for them facing the Colts. Vontae Davis won't be on the field, so obviously he won't be there to help, shadow anybody or even help in run support a little bit. So I think Todd Gurley has a pretty high probability for scoring at least 1 touchdown this week, if not, 2 or 3. So I like Todd Gurley this week, and I think he's definitely a pretty good option in cash games. All right, so I'm sharing another running back. It's the last one I promised, and it's DeMarco Murray. I feel like he's really being slept on this week. First off, this game has a huge total. Like this game, I did not expect this game to have such a high game total in Vegas, but right now, game total is sitting at 50.5, which is the second highest game total on the slate. Only the Green Bay and Seattle game has a higher one. So this Oakland-Tennessee game may be a good one to try and stack here. I also really want to point out that, DeMarco Murray is kind of sandwich priced, as I like to call it. He's kind of stuck in between some of the, reasonable cheap options and then some of the really good expensive options. He's stuck between the big three and Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley's sitting at 6K, I believe it is. And then you have the three main running backs I talked about earlier, and David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, and LaShawn McCoy. And he's kind of in between all of those. So I feel like that's going to help his ownership there. I also think it's just a great spot to play Murray. I mean, with this high game total, that obviously bodes well for him. Also, Murray kind of flies under the radar. He's actually a pretty heavily targeted running back. He did have 67 targets last season, which doesn't sound like a lot when we're talking about, some of the top-tier receiving running backs, but that's still top 10 in the NFL. But the big number that I want to point out here is his red zone targets. He had the most red zone targets among any running back in the NFL last year at 18. Not only that, he had the most red zone targets on the Titans last season. So that just blows my mind right there. I can't believe that. So because of that, if that keeps up, I really like this because the Titans have always seemed more of like a running team to me anyway. You know, obviously Mariota has a little bit of scrambling ability. I mean, he has quite a bit of scrambling ability, but I just don't feel like I see him do it that often. But, you know, the running back game is strong with Derrick Henry and, of course, DeMarco Murray here. So I think they creep into red zone territories a lot. You know, I talked about this in my Wednesday video with the Raiders. I feel like since they got Marshawn Lynch now, I feel like they're going to be running the ball a bit more. So because of that, you know, teams creep into the red zone, in my opinion, when they're only picking up, you know, 6, 7, 8 yards at a time on the ground. Whereas, you know, teams that tend to throw the ball more, I feel like they tend to get bigger chunk plays more often, right? So I like Murray. I think he's going to be on your own. I'm not going to play a ton of him, but I definitely think he's a good GPP play. All right, so finishing up here with the quarterback in DeSean Kaiser, and at 4,800, you have to consider this guy. Like, I know it sounds crazy to be thinking about playing a rookie, you know, facing the Pittsburgh Steelers in his very first NFL regular season game, but it actually makes sense fantasy-wise. So first off, right now, rotogrinders.com has DeSean Kaiser listed as 5th among all quarterbacks in projected points per dollar. Basically, what that means is that even though he doesn't have a huge projection of points right now, he's sitting at 16. He's so cheap that they're saying that he has a ton of value. It's basically just a stat to tell you how good a value is for a specific player. So Kaiser has a great projected points per dollar rating right now at 16 points. If he can hit 15, 16 points, those extra funds you save, if you spend them in the right spots, it's definitely going to pay off for you. So for me, any given week, I'm always looking to spend the least amount of funds as I can at the quarterback position, because the position point variance at quarterback is the lowest of any other position, meaning that the gap between, say, a 7K quarterback points and a 4.8K quarterback points is not going to be as great as it would be at another position, say like wide receiver. So because of that, we should always look for as much value at the quarterback position as we can. I feel like if this game goes the way that a lot of people are expecting it to, with the Browns playing from behind, that actually works in Kaiser's favor because he's going to be slinging the ball around a lot. And you know, if he throws a couple interceptions, who cares? You only lose 1 point for every interception on DraftKings. So, you know, if anything, when he throws an interception, I hope it's a pick 6 so he gets the ball right back and has more chance to put up some points. So, looks like he has a little bit of a rushing upside as well. I haven't seen him scramble a ton in the preseason, but I didn't watch him too heavily. So, you know, I think Kaiser's an interesting option to play in cash games. Obviously, do not go that route in GPPs unless you just want to, you know, have like kind of like a studs and scrubs type lineup, which, you know, makes sense if you want to go that route. But I like Kaiser a lot for cash games, which is just crazy. I never would have thought that I would be saying this, you know, months ago. But Kaiser is actually a pretty reasonable cash game play here. So, you know, take a look at him. You don't have to play him, of course, if you want to spend for 4.8K. But, you know, there's other quarterbacks in that realm that you could play. So, you know, take a look at him and, you know, tell me what you think in the comment section below. All right, so that's going to do it for this week's picks. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to check out my Twitch channel and my Twitter down below. Twitter is a great place to message me. If you have any questions about specific players, you can always drop that down in the comment section below as well. Also in the comment section, let me know who are some of your favorite sleeper/value picks this week, and we can kind of talk about that down there as well. Also, if you follow my Twitch channel, hopefully you guys can check out a couple of the live streams that I want to do somewhere down the road where we do some group lineup making. If you're into that, the link will be down in the description once again. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, and I will catch you guys in the next one next week. Later.